Jess, thanks for meeting with me today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Frank. I'm happy to be here.
That's great. So maybe let's start this way. Can you unpack a little bit what your role and responsibilities are at ShopCore Properties?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am on the leasing team here at ShopCore. Just got back from a conference yesterday. So when I'm not traveling either in Palm Springs or Chicago or some of our other assets in Seattle and so forth, I'm at my desk calling prospective tenants, renewing existing tenants, and trying to get the best deal for a new tenant into some of our vacancies. So that's kind of my day to day.
Sounds like a lot of energy right there.
Yeah, it's fun. It's a very people-oriented business. Relationships are important. And Marissa, she's been in the industry and with a lot of female leaders, and it's been fun to get to meet her and see her, take this platform really far. So I'm happy to be a part of it.
Yeah, that's amazing. So when you first started this journey with Otso, you probably had some expectations. It's a new technology. Fundamentally, it's change in how you're currently working. So did you have maybe some apprehensions or something like that? And potentially, once you got into working with the solution, when did you start to feel good about it, about the direction that it was heading?
That's a good question. I would say for our company, we've historically always sort of reviewed financials in-house, and we've never worked with another third-party platform. It was really, obviously, these people have a really high net worth, and they have, 70 plus locations of whatever franchise they're a part of. And they're weary a lot, oftentimes, to share certain financials and certain criteria that we look for. But Otso has been super professional, and obviously, I think there's maybe a 30 or so day window where financials are removed from Otso's records, if you will, at some point. So I think that is helpful for a lot of the tenants that we work with. But I think ultimately the apprehension just came from we've never worked with any other third party before. And so it was just kind of taking that risk, if you will, on seeing how this goes. And it's been this ever since.
Awesome. That's fantastic. And that's a good point that you bring up around privacy and trust. There's a lot of personal information that's exchanged in the process. Prior to adopting, what challenges were you facing?
Yeah, so it's kind of funny. It's maybe a sore point previously at our company, but we probably went through a handful of renditions on what's the best assignment process, and it's probably still changing, but for now, I think we're good. But what I mean by that is originally leasing was sort of always taking the charge on, okay, this is our tenant that we're working with. Here's our financial criteria. Here's what we need from you guys. And we're collecting all of that. But then at a certain point, we're then releasing all of that to our asset management team, who, this is their first time they're ever getting to understand what the tenant is like. It was up to leasing to say, you know, they have X locations, they're a first time operator, maybe, kind of giving them the full background and history of them as an operator. And I think while that was good, I also think for our company specifically, and I'm sure a lot of other REITs can attest to this, is they want their leasing team to be focused on leasing and not collecting financials and, oh, you missed your 2022 tax returns, and trying to like piecemeal financial documents. Whereas now with Otso, it's in the hands of your team, and they're super diligent on, oh, Maria, you missed this and we need this, and why did you provide this? So in a lot of ways, that's taken previous efforts off of our hands and into the hands where it should be.
I like that shift to being able to handle some of the challenges of your job that pre-exist that aren't going to get solved by technology, but now you have more time to focus on that.
Yeah, exactly. So, and that's speaking freely.
Mhm.
I love leasing and that's my job. And I don't know that I obviously, reviewing and approving financials is huge. It's a huge part to our business. We want to make sure that they're valuable and sort of they're liable for the lease that they're signing. but it's not my favorite part of the job. So I'm glad that I can pass it off to someone else.
Yeah, I don't think it's described as fun or cool. So I
Yeah.
appreciate that comment. When it comes to adopting the solution, were we helpful in terms of making that process easier for you?
Yeah, for sure. And I think originally it started with our leasing operations team. So anytime myself or the folks on the leasing team would say, "Hey, Mary, here's a finalized LOI, take it and run, collect financials." At
Mhm.
a certain point, we as the leasing folks were like, "Wait, where are we at in the process? Have they submitted everything?" Because we still want to know how the deal is moving along, every few days. So now it's in our court basically to fill out the quick, here's their first name, entity, and all that, and get it submitted. And I think that's been better for us because we're able to see live time. Otso's requesting different documents to the tenant and they copy us, which I
Mm.
think is valuable to the tenant to see because sometimes, if it was just Otso reaching out to the tenant without having us copied, the tenant is probably like, who are you guys? Why would I
That's
give you
right.
any of my financials? So I think that's been a great part of the platform.
Yeah, I really think that in some respects, you win the war before you fight the war. Jess, you're setting expectations with your tenants before they enter into the process that I can tell you from our side makes it more successful. What are you doing to really set this expectation and to kind of rocket your tenants through the process?
Yeah, so I think what helps for us is, as you mentioned, setting the expectation earlier on prior to even, having a finalized LOI, because there's oftentimes, we have brokers on certain properties and they obviously do a good job of collecting initial financials from usually mom and pop
Hmm.
tenants and just to kind of screen them quickly. But what we often do is tell them, hey, thank you for sending in, a quick gist of your financials just to let you know this is forthcoming. Once we get to a finalized LOI, we'll have you go through the sort of formal application process with a third party company. So it kind of sets their mind up for the future. And when they see that coming and we're all copied on it, I think they feel comfortable with that.
That's so on point. I love it.
Yeah.
So, a question for you when you're evaluating, especially like a new business, or maybe it's a small business, it's involving personal guarantors, it can get tricky and it's more complex. Would you say that there are some specific benefits you could identify using Otso that help that process move smoother?
Yeah, so I guess one of the things, and I don't know if this is a direct answer, but
Mhm.
one of the things that I really like about the Otso platform is there's, 3 to 6 maybe different types of reports that our company can request, whether it is a full
Mhm.
personal guarantee or maybe it's a corporate structure and kind of all that. So I think having flexibility from our end, because every deal is different, is
Mhm.
helpful.
I think what you're
Okay.
saying is just like your ability to select specifically what you need for that particular leasing scenario gives you the ability to dial it in right from the beginning.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so just having that flexibility is great because then it tailors the report for our team when they review it. And we actually had a tenant recently. They're, I think, a little bit more mom and pop. I'm forgetting
Mhm.
what center, but it was like the first report that our region, our asset managers had seen, like, 100 across the board on kind of the main like green circles on the first or
Mhm.
second page, and he's like, oh, like this is so easy, like, yes, we're going to approve them, but it's sometimes rare that we see that, but when we do, it's exciting. So
Yeah, and to achieve that on our platform is no like easy feat. So it actually does raise the eyebrows of excitement. So I like that.
yeah.
So when you think about your organization and how you're trying to manage your business, can you maybe call out certain things where you're seeing clear efficiencies and optimization of the process where you're more effective in the lease negotiation? And maybe is it something where you're feeling some direct cost savings as well?
Yeah, so one of the things that we think about, whether it be on renewals, mainly new deals, for assignment subletting fees, we'll try to request somewhere in the range of 2 to 5,000 or so
Hmm.
per request. That allows us to do is in the future, if a tenant is assigning their business and we need to use Otso to review the assignee's financials, we now have sort of a fee in place that helps us be able to use Otso on a more regular basis.
Hmm.
So I think something like that is helpful. In the past, when leasing was the predominant communicator with tenants and collecting their financials, I think it took a lot of our time to, you know, sort through all of the financial documents that a tenant would provide us and have to say, oh, we need your most recent bank statements and they need to be personal. So things like that, that really did take a lot of our time. And now Otso steps in, they copy us and they tell the tenant exactly what they need. They bullet point it. It's super easy for the tenant to understand. And the best part is that the reports, as soon as I submit one, in for Otso to sort of gear up and get ready to send out to a tenant. It's within a matter of a day, I think, that they reach out to the tenant and get the process started, and they remind them if they've opened the report but haven't added anything in. So that's been good to see. So it's a super quick turnaround.
Yeah, that's great. You can see all the power of having the data and the AI capabilities, but also behind the scenes, the horsepower that's working to drive momentum around the
Yeah.
process. You spoke about Marissa and the rest of her team, so that's super important. Maybe you can also share a little bit about the fact that so many of the companies have this being performed internally. They don't have it outsourced. And so there is an internal cost to it. Speak to how your organization made that assessment between the cost to do this internally versus do it externally and how you're viewing that cost going forward.
Yeah, so I think it's a two-part answer. I think number one, our executive team and sort of everyone in the company does believe that everyone's time is valuable. So
Mhm.
if we're able to move deals along quicker, we're going to get more deals done across the finish line, which ultimately helps us overall. So I think that's one part that's maybe not budgeted for these types of reports. And then I think the other part, it goes back to having assignment fees in place for scenarios like where we would use an OTSO report.
Mhm.
And it makes us a little bit more strategic with who we're using OTSO for, if we're maybe concerned about what their financials look like versus if we have Panda Express and it's a corporate signature and kind of all of that.
Right.
We tend to probably take that just in-house and trust that, okay, they're going to be good, they're going to pay their rent, and we don't necessarily have to use Otso for this one. So I think in some ways it's forced us to be a little bit more strategic, but then it gives us more peace of mind at the end of the day when we do have an Otso report in place.
Yeah, that's great. Maybe without using any names, could you maybe spotlight a couple of user stories, success stories, maybe some positive experiences that you've had with Otso thus far?
Yeah, I think across the board, and especially for some of our tenants who, whether it's a franchise entity, mom and pop, tenant, I think a lot of them are just satisfied with the communication, how quickly Otto is getting back to them, and so forth. And like I said before, it's just helped us as a company overall get more deals done and take a little bit less weight off of our team overall because, our asset management team and analysts can only analyze so many deals and so many different things at one time. So I think it's been really just helpful overall, both tenant and the landlord side.
That's great. Is there anything unexpected maybe that comes to mind? Maybe you had some concerns up front, those were assuaged, you felt good about it, it's going great, but maybe something came about that you didn't expect was going to be a positive outcome or benefit. Is there anything like that that you could call out?
Yeah, I would say more recently, we have assignment that we're working through in Texas, and I was a little hesitant about that the tenant was trying to change the business completely. And so
Mhm.
I asked our leasing operations team, hey, I want to get a little bit more color on what their business looks like going
Mhm.
forward. Is this their first
Mhm.
time operation? Do they have a business plan? Kind of all of those questions that we would ask for any new tenant per se. And in my head, I was anticipating our leasing operations team to take those questions and ask the tenant, but Otso stepped in immediately and they said, hey, Jess, we've asked so and so, Katie, just throwing out a name for these questions, and we're hoping to get the business plan back. So I think little things like that, where Otso is the team is just taking it upon themselves because
Mhm.
they know it's all part of the process. So
Yeah.
little things like that. And this happened, I think, earlier this week. And I was like, oh, that was awesome. Like, really appreciated that because it just keeps us moving forward.
Yeah, that's great. That's just initiative, right? And there's a great saying that says the secret to success is knowing what others want of you before they know they want it of you and doing it.
That's awesome. Yeah. Like being resourceful, all the things. So that's awesome. That's a great quote.
So I have one question for you, and it's more of a scenario. So I want you to, for lack of a better word, play along with me here. So imagine that you're getting into an elevator. It's a 40-story building. You're on the ground floor and you step on and you see a person in the elevator. They're a leasing representative. They're a friend of yours. They're a peer in another organization, lots of mutual respect. And it occurs to you that like you want to share about Otso. What would that elevator ride sound like? What would you say to that person?
That is a great question. My elevator pitch for Otto, being very genuine and frank, I think every REIT, every landlord should be using Otso. Just to give you sort of my own background, my family has some of their own real estate holdings in Northern California, and my dad and my mom, they work together with property management and so forth. And I'm like, how do you guys review financials? And they're like, well, we just kind of hope and pray, cross our fingers. And I'm like, that doesn't sound very good or very advantageous. But my hope is that one day my family will start using Otso because, again, I just think you guys are the bee's knees, truly, and just super diligent. You guys know the requirements that we ask for and sometimes go above and beyond what we ask for. So yeah, I mean, just truly through and through, could not recommend Otso anymore to any company.
That's fantastic. Well, we appreciate working with you. It's all about collaboration. We know that life is a three-handed job. We're born for cooperation, and we couldn't be more appreciative of how you cooperate with us.
Awesome. Yeah, I really appreciate you guys, and the same goes to you all. Thank you so much for having me on today, and hopefully we'll have plenty more deals to work through together.
Let's make that happen.
Awesome. I love it. Thank you again, Frank.